Welcome to another episode of Consumer Engagement in an Omnichannel World. Our co-hosts, Shri Rajgopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers in-store, online, and everywhere in between. And now, here's Shri and Peter.
Welcome to the next episode of Consumer Engagement in the Omnichannel World with Shri and Peter Bond. Also, hashtag Shri and PVSP. And today we continue with the treat we have for you, which is episode 3 of a 6-part series focused on the omnichannel shopper with the industry legend, a mentor of mine, Bryan Gildenberg himself. And today we're going to discuss retail transformation based on the shopper habits that we actually did refer to back in episode 1 of 6. And who in retail is ready? Are they really ready? Is Amazon really successful in this space and things of that nature? So Bryan, could you please introduce yourself for us?
Absolutely, yeah. Hey there, everybody. I'm Bryan Gildenberg. I'm the SVP of Commerce for the Omnicom Retail Group. The Omnicom Retail Group is a collection of agencies within Omnicom that specialize in retail in all its forms. Probably known best for the brands it trades under, the Integer Group, Tracy Locke, Haygarth, TPN, and TMA. Prior to that, for about 23 years or so, I was involved in the retail research world over at Kantar, and for a long time oversaw our research on brick and mortar and digital retail around the world.
Thank you, Bryan. And I've had the luxury of working with many of those agencies, by the way, across the brands that
yes, you certainly
have worked together on. So the first thing here, when we really talk about retail transformation based on these new, and I think you said we shouldn't think of things radically changing in terms of shopper habits, but what's sure is what they shop for has somewhat gone more digitally penetrated versus what it was before, and what they aren't shopping for. Private label is somewhat taking on somewhat of a new role, and exposure for the first time. So if taking Amazon to the side, who do you think from a retail perspective is setting themselves up well during the last 3 months and for the future?
Oh, well, I think there's some pretty clear winners in the consumables category, and then we'll look at sort of what I call non-consumable retail. But the biggest winner is just looking at the math in terms of consumables. I mean, Walmart's done extremely well, and then Sam's Club has done very, very well from an omnichannel point of view. And you always knew eventually that at some point Costco's systematic underinvestment in e-commerce as a platform would probably start to be a bit of a problem. Right now, I think if you look at Costco, I think a lot of the benefit that they've gotten out of e-commerce recently has had to depend on Instacart, which unfortunately, given where Costco's buildings are, ran into some capacity issues that hurt their ability to deliver a proposition to shoppers through the online world. So Walmart, Sam's Club, Target, and Kroger have all done really, really well, accelerating their omnichannel business. I think the other retailers that have done, the other 3 retailers, and then Dollar General, not necessarily through digital, but just through strong brick and mortar presence, and the fact that their shopper actually, of all the shoppers in America, may have more money in their wallet during this time than they normally do. They've done really well. I would also just start Home Depot and Lowe's, who have obviously had particularly strong periods of time as people stare at things in their house that need fixing and finally decide to fix them. So.
All right. My question to you is a little provocative. Shoppers love Instacart because it's a homogeneous experience and it's easy for them to switch retailers. Retailers hate Instacart because it's a homogeneous experience. Right. And they have no unique customer experience. Who's going to win in this battle? And if it's the consumer, how is the retailer going to deal with that?
Well, in a shocking surprise, because this is the way that every single showdown between what consumers want and what businesses feel like selling ever goes, consumers going to win. That's just it's just too bad. I think the other thing is that Instacart just, I think it's, I can't remember which guru of investing it is that says it's because, look, in the end, just don't bet against a good product. The world's simple sometimes. Instacart's a good product. And Instacart also has a critical mass of retailers that don't want to solve e-commerce themselves. And the 2 biggest ones in that ecosystem are Costco and Aldi. And it's always hard to, and there's a lot of reasons for that, which are too boring to get into right now. But if you assume that Costco and Aldi are going to continue to solve their e-commerce thing through Instacart. That's going to give them critical mass, and I think that's going to work. I do think there's an opportunity for retailers to do interesting things through Instacart, and Albertsons tried this actually. I thought this was a great idea. I don't think it worked, but they tried setting up an organic store on Instacart. So is this a separate store? No. It's just a regular Albertsons store. But all they did was curated the assortment within the Instacart experience to make you feel like you were shopping at an organic-only store by just only offering you through that banner a subset of what was available in the core Albertsons store. That's a really good idea. And as I said, it may not have worked, but things like that, I think there are ways to create retailer distinctive experiences through Instacart. I just don't think anybody's thinking about it yet.
I would say that you're spot on, and particularly with respect to the retailers that have their own e-commerce, they're not going to walk away from Instacart because there's too much consumer demand. But also Instacart, to some degree, the platform is, strangely enough, even better. A great example is Instacart has an image carousel, Safeway Albertsons doesn't.
Yeah.
And we know the visual component of the product page is one of the most important. If you've never actually seen the product or physically held it, that's going to be critically important. So I think that Instacart's here, to your point, to stay.
Yeah, the speed and consistency of the Instacart interface, particularly if you use it across multiple retailers, is also a big value proposition.
I still feel, folks, that Instacart is highly undervalued and devalued by the entire CPG industry.
I agree.
It is a fatal mistake that's going to cost scale brands heavily in the long run.
And go ahead. Sorry.
It's just wrong.
It just seems really silly to me that it's it provides it provides an essential service. 2, it's a really good product. 3, even if it never makes a dime, it's obviously positioned to get bought by somebody, probably Google, who needs to build. Like if you tried Instacart and then tried Google Shopping, I think you could see a pretty logical exit strategy for the Instacart group.
Some may call it night and day as it is today. But speaking of Google Shopping, many retailers, Google included, have experimented with other sort of services to drive in-store traffic.
Yeah.
CVS HealthHub comes to mind with the Minute Clinic. And then you think of even Walmart has, or virtually most large mass retailers tend to have pharmacy inside. But all those extra services they have depend on in-store trips. Do you see any changes coming there? Because what's gotten impacted in the last 3 months is in-store trips.
No, I don't. And I think actually those services become more important, not less, in an environment where trips start to disappear. Because if there are fewer trips available, you want as many reasons why someone would come to your store as possible that are legitimate and value added. And I think most brick and mortar retailers are going to find there's only so many of those they can do on their own without partnership. So I'm not sure that Walgreens is the future of retail here, but if you look at the percentage of square footage in a Walgreens that has a Kroger in it today, that Walgreens actually manages themselves, it's probably less than half the store. That's not hard to imagine as a world. And when you look at the market that's had very little growth in brick and mortar retail for 20 years, it's Japan. And if you look at a Japanese retail store, it's a collection of independent retail entities that are all run basically by a store whose primary job it is to be a landlord. So I'm not saying we're going that far, but yes, I think in-store services is going to be a huge and growing part of retail value propositions, both their own and
of every Macy's.
Well, yeah, now you got to do that in a sensible way. The CVS HealthHub, CVS is a healthcare company that occasionally is a retailer. So HealthHub makes a ton of sense for them. And for Walgreens, the flip side is true. They have enormously convenient real estate that they're just not as well positioned to optimize as Kroger is. So why not? What Macy's has done is different, which is tried to create an economic story by giving people an opportunity to sell stuff rather than by actually selling stuff. That model never works if somebody's trying to sell stuff next to you. So it only works if everybody's just trying to make money buying stuff.
So Bryan, one of the thing that hit me hard just a few seconds ago when you said it was the Japanese model. I feel it's the one rare country in the world. Most of the world is shifting from offline to online. Japan got great penetration with Rakuten quite a while ago. Literally Rakuten is what you just said. You become a landlord and you rent out mall space, and they've taken that model from Rakuten and brought it into their physical world. It's just fascinating.
Yeah, well, the Japanese retailers have been like that forever, actually, in terms of being landlords first. So yeah, and I think as you well know, it's dangerous to try to extrapolate any global trend out of Japan without it, without going, hey, look, that works here, but that's really different than everywhere else. So.
Bryan, we talked on this topic in a couple of previous episodes, or at least related to this, but talking about private label, are there any retailers you see that are doing a particularly good job of driving their private label through digital?
Through digital. That's an interesting question. I hate to give a simple answer because I love complicated ones. Not really. I mean, certainly not in consumables. I don't think that retailers today have quite the handle on, if you think about how people shop online and the search process they go through, I don't think they've mastered the online category decision tree well enough to understand where and how to message private label the right way in that context. The problem is with most American private labels is what I would call reflective private label. It's a mirror to the branded product that looks the same. It's sold at a cheaper price. It needs the light of the brand to be seen. And in e-commerce in America today, so much of what you're looking at is one item at a time, deep dives into that without that other item, it's really hard to appropriately value the private label product. And I know that, Peter, you were talking about that there are some retailers that are starting to get creative about this and get better around content. And that's a different type of relationship that a private label is going to have to the consumer, which is basically then it's a brand. It just happens to be owned by a retailer. I think in online, that's going to work better than that mirror image private label, because in the end, when you click to the item page, you're literally relying on the shopper to remember what the price point was of the brand, unless you actually put the brand next to the private label, which nobody seems to want to do, but would probably make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think the listing pages for retailers and the digital shelf is very different. It's not a brand block capability. It's much more item for item living by themselves. And
yes,
the more they can build trust and authenticity into that experience through badging, through visual imagery, through ratings and reviews, the better chance they have of doing it. So I think there are some, I think Target's really starting to move in that direction. They've got so many own brands, and the way they can display their content is.
I would caution everybody about getting too excited about Target's private label in anything that isn't designed. They've really struggled with it over the years. And I think in the end, the challenge you've got, and they're starting to get better about this, is that the best retailer private labels, to me, are the physical manifestation of the idea of the retailer in the form of a product. That's what Kirkland Signature is, right? If you ask somebody to describe Costco, it's Kirkland Signature. So it's the same thing. Target's equity is hard to translate to a repetitive purchase environment. And this is one of the things they've always grappled with. No matter how cool and fun the design is, it's Good and Gather right now, I think is their most recent private label, right? Target's equity isn't about goodness and gathering. Like, that's just not what it is. Like, it's not why you go to Target. They've just, especially in consumables, they've just really struggled with what used to be their simple nomenclature around bringing fashion to food. They try to bring fun design to food. They try to bring goofy ingredients to food. They try to bring a value on organics versus what other, sometimes they'll try to bring extreme value. They're just kind of all over the place, and none of what they do reflects the guest's idea of Target particularly well, would be my critique. So
fair enough.
So Bryan, we, keeping in spirit with the theme of retail transformation in the whole industry as such, the CPG industry and its partnership with the CPG industry, do you think retailers truly understand that the causals or the drivers of this new behavior, which are really search, content, SEO, what you choose to sell, what case packs you do it in, ratings and reviews, your user experience, which we talked about earlier, versus lobby, NCAP, display, Department 82, planogramming. Do you think retailers totally get this?
No, not at all. No, I don't think. And I don't think the brands do either. I mean, I think the brands are learning. Yeah, I mean, you've got 50 years of category management that needs to get reinterpolated towards a medium that doesn't display categories. It's hard, and it's hard for the manufacturers and it's hard for the retailers. No, I mean, I think the only way I think Amazon's gotten really good at optimizing it through a boat ton of data and an algorithmic centric approach to it that allows you to optimize choices. But I don't know that Amazon's got a real vision of where the digital shelf is going. That's just not how they think. And as opposed to everybody else, I think there's real work to do around intelligent personalization and curation. There's real work to do around understanding how shoppers actually shop online and which categories and items and events should be adjacent to one another. And, but basically what you've got right now is totally understandable, but everybody's paved the category management goat path and put the store online. So, and that's clearly not going to be the way this ends up.
I've always believed that Amazon has succeeded in spite of itself and not because of itself. And it's still heavily reliant on people who bought this item also bought that item as the primary mechanism. There's not a lot of great thought behind it, but
no, I think Amazon they realized that to me, it's a weird metaphor. They're kind of like an index fund, right? I mean, you've got all these people out here trying to beat the market, and all of a sudden Amazon came along and said, why don't we just build an algorithm that is the market, and have people try and beat that? And 90% of fund managers don't outperform the S&P 500 index. So,
Bryan, are there one or two retailers that you think are doing particularly well at building and offering a digital shelf?
I'll give you a couple of examples that where you do see it. One of which I wouldn't call out for building a digital shelf, but there are two retailers that speak mobile incredibly well, and okay, they are unsurprisingly beauty retailers. But I think Sephora and Ulta are really worth looking at in terms of how they're able to translate their experience into mobile in a way that's really, really powerful. I think that they are by a mile the best mobile retailers in the country. And I think that matters because an overwhelming majority of American digital time is spent on a mobile device. I would say the other one historically that's been pretty good at it, and Lowe's is starting to catch up to them, but Home Depot's probably been better at this than anybody in terms of, and again, they have the luxury of being a retailer that's fairly item dependent as well. Unlike Lowe's that sells projects more than Home Depot does. Home Depot's got some elements of item dependency that have allowed it to do that. But the integration between the store and the online experience at Home Depot is still probably on balance better than most retailers in particular. So.
Bryan, I was going to ask you, which retailers to follow in terms of comprehensive omni-channel experiences, but I think you just answered it. Between Lowe's, Sephora, Ulta, we've got multiple categories to follow. So I'm going to jump right forward to the next one, which is we talked a little bit about Amazon in the previous episode. And what are weaknesses or what are perceived weaknesses or shortcomings other than the user experience of the single unit each purchasing design that Amazon you see or you've heard in the industry?
It's my second crack at answering this question, so I can do it more efficiently. Baskets and curation. Those are the two. Those are your two. If Amazon is Achilles, but his mom grabbed two heels when they dipped him into the water. The left heel is baskets, the right one is curation. And that's where being able to sell 10 or 12 items at a time in a really efficient, engaging, and sensible way, and selling categories that require curation. And this is where grocery is the left heel in this example, and apparel is the right. It's really hard to sell apparel without curation.
But in some ways, Bryan, if that is a weakness or that is a shortcoming, and other scale retailers, that is their strength, why do they keep wanting to go back and fight the individual each's model and be able to do individual each's delivery?
Every retail, as you know, Sri, you know this better than I do. Retailers will copy each other, and Walmart in particular, and God love them. But Walmart has a tendency to try to build the second best version of whatever they see, and then hope that people like it and not love it, and that they use it. So, and they did this with Sam's Club. They did this with Neighborhood Market. They've done this a number of times over the years. it's incumbent upon everybody, all of us that work with Walmart in the ecosystem, to teach Walmart how to not try to be the second best Amazon in the country, but be the best version of Walmart that they can. And when Doug talks about this, he talks about grocery and he talks about the unique capabilities that Walmart brings to the table. That's exactly the right conversation to have. But I do think that Walmart's hardwired to try and replicate the best of what it does, and that goes back to Sam Walton and the DNA of the company. And then once you've got Amazon and Walmart doing it, just everybody else kind of does the same thing, unless you're courageous enough to go, hey, you know what, there's a better way to do this, or you don't have any capital or any assets and you do what the heck. So, and that's where things like Boxed and Instacart and and Sephora and Ulta come into play. They had an opportunity. They weren't constrained by a legacy way of looking at things, I suppose.
I know Peter's itching to ask you the last question of this episode, so take it away.
Yeah, I'm going to jump right to it. Bryan, my background was at dunnhumby, and then I was the guy responsible for those 6-foot-long register receipts at CVS. So my question to you is,
sweet.
Yeah, I know it's a dubious distinction. It'll be on my gravestone. I have no doubt.
Your gravestone will be wrapped in them. That's all.
Yeah, it will. They're going to wrap me in those register receipts like a mummy.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be the first person to be registered tape mummified.
Wonderful. So I'd like an outsider's perspective, at least from outside of me. Yeah. Do you see retailer personalization working at scale, and is it driving profits for retailers? I
would say, and you would know this better than me, I would say that personalization, small bore personalization, works fine. Understanding somebody's transactional behavior well enough to be able to adapt variants, particularly around pricing and promotion, so that they receive a variant that is more targeted to them. Yeah, that works. It's not putting a man on the moon, but it works. So I think anything larger than that has become problematic, and I don't think that's the fault of personalization. I think it is Gary Vee's been in the news talking about this a lot recently. About the can't even remember, but basically called it sort of industrial scale creativity or something like that, where you've got. The problem people have with personalization, at least from my perspective, is you go through all the effort of coming up with these targets and segments and audiences, and you've refined it, and you have nothing distinctive to say to them. And if you're not going to have anything distinctive to say to them, no, the ROI on personalization is never going to pay out. If you want to say the same thing to everybody, just do it quickly and cheaply. But you see so little distinctive. There's so much less distinctiveness in the messaging that you're delivering to a personalized audience than there is in the audience, that until you build a model that allows you to figure out how to meaningfully understand the message you should be delivering there and getting it right, I think any brand is going to struggle with finding an ROI in personalization, but that doesn't mean it's a bad idea. That means you need to learn how to do it better. So,
Bryan, as we wrap up episode 3 of 6 here in the Omnichannel Shopper in 2020, the entire financials of the CPG industry were built around basket and curation, as you said, and not around personalization. That starts at innovation and ends at media and advertising. And that's why D2C is still a tiny fractional percent of the entire CPG ecosystem. But Bryan, Peter and I cannot thank you enough for coming on board and chatting with us about Shopper 2020 as it is in the middle of the pandemic. We'll be back next week where we shift our focus from retail to brands. And
excellent.
We'll be discussing what brands need to do to transform, keeping, most important word, the consumer at the nucleus. You can follow our series on LinkedIn at this link below, hashtag Shri and PVSB, and is A&D. You can also follow us on this link, which has a playlist of all our YouTube videos on these topics by clicking on this link. And you can also find us on the podcast format if you're a listener versus a viewer. We are across 10 plus platforms, your favorite ones, Apple, Spotify, and you can catch that right here on this link. So thank you, folks. Thank you as always, Peter, for what you do for us here and for your engaging commentary. And Bryan, we will see you again on the next episode.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Take care. Bye.